First, welcome everybody. I appreciate all being here, and I thank Connie and the Warbirds and Review program. As she said, I'm kind of new at this. This isn't my regular job, but she threw me in, and I'm pleased, proud, and honored to be able to take part. We have two distinguished visitors here, and before we go there, if you all were here this morning at all, I'm going to start this program the same way I did this morning. This is a Vietnam, Southeast Asia honoring day, if you will. So I'm going to ask first, any Vietnam vets out in the audience? If you are, please stand up. Vietnam vets. Thank you very much. I'll continue that. Any family members that supported with brothers, fathers, sisters, uncles, whatever, any other of those type vets, those supports. There you go. And they're the people who supported y'all, so thank you very much. And then finally, hey, veterans, period. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. Hey, all you guys stand up. I know, and gals, I should say. Thank you very much. And I'm going to start this, and Dick has no idea. First of all, I got to say, how do you introduce a guy like Dick Rutan? I mean, you know, his bio's about this long. I mean, he's been presented medals by the president. The awards just go on and on and on. And I'm kind of going, okay, so how do I start this? And I said, okay, he's here. I'm supposed to kind of steer the ship. And I've heard rumor that Dick is kind of a hard ship to steer at times. But I'm going to do my best to do that. But it is a Vietnam themed program today. And I've presented many medals in my past. I'm not presenting anything. I'm merely reading a citation today. And I'm going to read a citation that maybe not many of you know of in regards to that man standing or sitting right there. And I'll start it the way I always start, and it normally starts with, hey, this is an award, and it means a lot to that man, I'm sure. It means a lot to me. And I start with attention to order. And I'll just read it. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, July 9th, 1918, takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star to Captain Richard G. Rutan, United States Air Force, for gallantry in connection with military operations against an opposing armed force as an F-100F forward air controller operating over North Vietnam on 26 May, 1968. On that date, Captain Rutan planned and coordinated an attack against co-located heavy anti-aircraft artillery sites, which threatened to halt air operations against a critical key target on a major line of communication. Directing armed fighters, Captain Rutan repeatedly exposed himself to the intense and accurate hostile ground fire to ensure the destruction and neutralization of the gun sites. His phenomenal aggressiveness, superior airmanship, and complete disregard for his personal safety in the face of intense ground fire was instrumental in removing a severe threat to air operations engaged in the interdiction of arms and supplies moving into forward staging areas. By his gallantry and devotion to duty, Captain Rutan has reflected great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Dick Rutan sitting right there right now. And that was a particular mission that we may be able to talk about later on, and I know you've got others, but that's going to be the theme today. What we're going to do basically is talk a little bit about, hey, the Misty FAC. This morning we were talking about the Ravens. Well, this guy's a Misty FAC, and he was one of the first and probably had some of the most missions of any Misty FAC up there. Am I not correct? Okay. And by saying Misty FAC, what are we defining that as? That's a fast FAC mission. That's an F-100F two-seat. And they were the forward air controllers, if you will, up north. And we're talking about North Vietnam now. These guys would mark the targets for the strikers, if you will, and they were the F-4s, the A1s, and then, hey, direct the eyeballs and the bombs on target to kill the bad guys up there. A very unique mission, a very dangerous mission. He did it for a long time, as I said, and we've got Paul Wood up here, who generously loaned us his airplane, and neither of us have flown this airplane, okay, or an A1 at all. But this is a integral part of the mission, and Dick will talk about the number of missions probably that he controlled, A1s, dropping bombs on the bad guys up there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dick and just ask, first of all, hey, can you define, hey, how'd you get into the Misty business? And was it difficult? And what exactly was it? I kind of briefly described it, but you've got the details. So, Dick, you got it. You can stay down. You don't have to sit. You don't stand unless you want to.
If I stand up, the blood doesn't go to my head. First of all, I want to recognize Pam Tackerberry. Stand up. Her husband was a fellow Misty. Unfortunately, Tom is he's not here with us anymore. But anyway, there's one of the heroes that I know of that stayed at home in the home front. And you ever heard of the blue car? If you're in the housing area, the blue car comes with somebody with a Class A uniform and another guy. That's a chaplain. And if you're a wife of a vet, of somebody that's in combat, that's something that you don't want to see. But he asked, how did I get involved in that? I was a student in fascination right after World War II about those guys that flew those missions over Nazi Germany. Where it was unlike, remember, 3 out of 4 was their loss rates. 3 out of 4 went over there, and they were casualties. And they told me that there was more people in World War II that died over the skies of Nazi Germany than the Army and the Marines put together for the whole war. Every airplane had 10 people in it. And I read all the books I can, and I couldn't imagine who are those people that flew those missions. It was not uncommon for your squadron to go over there, and every single one of that squadron was shot down. And you came, you're the only one back. You're all limped up, you have wounded on board, and you come back and just barely make it on those long, high-altitude missions. But my question was, as I read about those things, how in the hell do you get back in another airplane the next day and do that? Think about it. Who in the hell are those people? And I always wanted to be a warrior. That was an exciting thing to do. The ultimate in human competition. And I had to find out that if I could do that, why did they do that? And I got to find out the first time I got shot at. But when I got into Vietnam, most of the missions were in country. Most of the missions, we never had any ground fire. We never saw what the target was. It was dropping bombs in a jungle with the smoke rocket from one of the A1 or one of the little Cessnas. And they drop the bombs and go home. And I knew there was a lot of activity down there, and I wanted to know what that was all about. But we always left the area. And then I found out about this classified, out-of-country Misty. And they were an experimental thing. Can a forward air controller survive in the intense flak of North Vietnam? And so they had a small group of people. Major Bud Day set that thing up. And unfortunately, he was training one of the new pilots, and he got shot down himself. And I often thought about that. Bud Day, our commander, he got shot down, and he was hiding at a bomb crater, and the helicopter came right up. Now, the helicopter had rescued his front seater, his training pilot. But that helicopter came right up, and Bud Day come up to the edge of it, and he's waving at the helicopter. And he could see the guy right in the door, right there. And they didn't see him. They turned around and left, and he spent 6.5, 7 years as a prisoner of war in Hanoi. And his contact, his bravery of what he did as a prisoner of war, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. So you can imagine he was a very extraordinary man. And when I was over there, that's right, thank you. When I was over there, I was getting kind of bored with the missions we were flying, and I didn't come here to do that. I wanted some more excitement. And then I heard, by accident, this little group of people, a handful of pilots and a few airplanes that were going into the north. And some of the stories that they told, I says, hey, I want to do that. So I went to my flight commander. I'm brand new in Vietnam, and I says, hey, I want to be a Misty. And he says, no, Rutan, they're only having, you got to be a flight lead. I says, okay, make me a flight lead. I want to go. He says, no, Rutan, guy, it'll take you 6 months or more to upgrade to flight lead status. So I kept bugging him, and I kept bugging him. And he got so upset with me. He says, "God damn it, Rutan." He says, "I'll make you a flight lead." So I flew a flight lead mission. I didn't do a very good job. But I came back, and he says, "Rutan, you're a flight lead. Now get the hell out of here." And for the next 8 months, I never came back because I got so intrigued with the mission, the Misty mission up there, that it was exciting, really exciting. And our job was to interdict supplies and stuff coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So it's kind of like a camouflage college. They would try to hide things, and we'd try to find them. And if they could see what their camouflage is from the air, they'd have never done it. Because they would take foliage and put it over their trucks and in their gun sights, but they didn't realize that the bottom of the leaf was slightly a different color. And when you can see that slightly different color in an oblong square, you knew it was a truck. If you knew that when there were the Soviet-style anti-aircraft gun sights in a nice circle, you knew that was a gun sight. So I don't believe I ever saw a gun to start with, but we sure killed a lot of them, and that was pretty exciting.
All right, question, first of all, what was your typical armament? What did you carry? Rockets, and you had guns on board for sure.
Okay, the Misty mission was, of course, 330-gallon drop tanks, and on the outboard we had, I think they were called Lao 7s, but Lao 9s. But anyway, they had 7 individually fired rockets, white phosphorus rockets that we could fire to mark. And then we also had in the two-seat F-100, which is a kind of a training airplane, they took half of our armament away. We had 4 guns, we only had 2, and we only had about 220 rounds of 20 millimeter. In our mission up there, they did not want their forward air controllers out. That's your job. You find them, you mark them, but let those guys be the war. But every once in a while, they would miss the target, and the target was so juicy, you'd look around, say, I can't let that goddamn truck get away. Example, one day there was fog all over the place, and there was just the tops of the hills out of the fog. And so they were driving, and there was probably about 30 trucks in this convoy during the daytime. They're trying to sneak in under the weather, right? But all of a sudden the road came up out of the fog. And so we just happened to be there, and we looked over there, and we saw these trucks coming out of the fog. So Ed Reisinger, one of the Misty pilots, he came around, armed the gun, and he shot the lead truck. And then he came around to shoot the back truck to keep him trapped. Okay, so we got him trapped. And I'll never forget that the lead truck that survived it, the guy had a white T-shirt on, and he was booking it down the trail. He was running like this. And then we turned it over to the fighter bombers. They come up there, and they had a fantastic truck kill that day. But anyway, that was kind of our mission. That they try to hide it, and we try to find it.
Okay, and how about the bombers that you controlled? Most of the time, F4s, occasional A1s, or a lot of A1s, or A7s, or what was the mix? What do you normally have?
Well, yeah. First of all, that's your airplane. They shined it all up. And I told him as we were talking in there that it's a beautiful airplane. I love these things for what they did. The hero pilots that flew them, they got all shot up. But there's one problem with that. I have a pet peeve. I damn near didn't even recognize it when it's sitting here. Because the one that they flew in Vietnam, they were all beat up. The paint jobs were faded. There was oil running them all over the place. And there was these silver patches all over them. And they looked like they were really used hard. And that's the ones that I remember that those guys flew. A lot of the times I was involved in shoot down. There was a lot of shoot downs that we witnessed or were part of for the rescue. Sometimes we put the pilots to sleep at dawn and says, hey, will you guys be there? And we'll come and get you in the morning. And usually the Misty was the first guy there, and he'd try to wake them up, and you didn't hear from them, a lot of them. One of the job of the Misty was to authenticate a downed crew member. And I remember one guy that was down, and he came back, And we woke him up the next morning, and there he was on a survival radio, and he was talking. And then they came back, and in Vietnam, right, the first thing you do when you get in country, you fill out 4 numbers. And they say, do not forget those numbers. And then they have a question and an answer. And you write the question, and you write the answer. And nobody knows what those are. They fold it up, put them in a sealed envelope, and they put it in a safe. And if you're ever shot down, they go and get that envelope out and then open it up. And they would relay to the Misty in the rest cap over North Vietnam. And he says, they knew who the pilot was. Now he's got to answer these questions. And it was always a lot, and it was always a lot of pressure. I says, boy, if I screw this thing up, they won't come and get him. So one day he come in and he says, authenticate college roommate's name. Okay, that's the question, right? So I hear that, college roommate's name. Okay, Dick, you got to get this just right. And I call him on his little handheld radio, and he says, Kabui. And I think, wait a minute, Kabui's not a name. There's no way. So I asked him again, came back, same thing, Kabui. And I thought, I mean, he's down, and what a shame it's going to be because I was unable to relay back to get authorization to come and get him. So I asked him for a third time, come back, says Kabui. And so I said, I'm going to say it exactly like his did. When I go back to our frequency, talk to Crown and says, authentication, Kabui. He says, that's him, go and get him. I mean, who has a name of Ken Bowie? I thought that was pretty weird anyway.
You got me.
Let's see, I want to talk a little bit about the book. This book. It's called Bury Us Upside Down. And it was one of my colleagues that I flew in combat with. We flew a lot of missions together, and he went on to be a general officer in charge of the Air National Guard.
My boss, by the way, at one time.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a definitive story. And he picked out about 5 guys that he kind of featured that he wrote about. And I don't know why, but I was select one of them. It was a great honor. So you wonder about the name of the book. And let me just paraphrase the last paragraph. Now, all warriors want to go back to the combat area at which they left. And so I was looking in the mirror one day, and my beard started getting gray, and I says, Dick, if you want to go back to Vietnam, you better go. And so at the end of the last century, I rounded up 5 other people, and Don Shepard was one of them. And we were going to go back to Vietnam to see it on the ground up in our area of operation in Laos and in North Vietnam. That was interesting, too. The 5 of us went up there. And the only thing we wanted to do, I wanted to go back where that truck was parked that I got shot down. And I want to go back to this village that they made the mistake of putting some ground fire in there that we had to take the village out. And there was a lot of things that happened. The Disappearing River, the Ban La Boy Ford, all of those areas. I wanted to go back and see what they looked like now because we'd only seen them from the air. So North Vietnam was always something really ominous to us. And so we're in this little van, and we have an interpreter, a Vietnamese interpreter. And by the way, this interpreter was he worked for the Marines as an interpreter. So he was working for the bad guys, for us. And when the war was over, they got a hold of him and put him in an internment camp and beat the hell out of him for 15 years to get him re-educated. Anyway, they let him go, and we hired him to be our interpreter. So we're in this little van. We're going up Route 1 from Saigon up to Hanoi. It's an old beat-up 2-lane road, highly traveled, poor excuse for a road. So we're driving up there, and we finally come to the Ben Hai River. The Ben Hai River was a demarcation between South Vietnam and North Vietnam. So we're driving up there, and I told him, hey, stop. I'm not driving across that bridge. So I looked over there to the right. There was an abandoned railroad bridge that was not in use. So all 6 of us got out. We walked to the front of this bridge that we're going to cross. And I called my detail to attention. I says, Misty's tin hut, line abreast, forward harch. And so those 6 Misties walked line abreast. That was an eerie feeling because every time I'd cross the border during the war, it was this really funny feeling. I walked line abreast up there, and when we got to the other side, we stepped foot. I hope it's okay what I'm going to say. Okay. We stopped, the first time we stepped in North Vietnam on the ground, and we did a right wheel on the road. And in unison, all 6 of us whipped it out and pissed on North Vietnam. Anyway, that was a great tour.
But finish it with the toast. Don't forget your toast.
Oh,
now.
the toast.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, these 6 guys went back to some 30 years later. And it says that, well, I'll paraphrase. It says they were up in the top of the Rex Hotel. And that was a big famous hotel in Saigon where all the press met and everything. But this is the Rex Hotel. We're up in the top thing. We're having dinner. And there was wine and good food. It says that they toasted everybody they knew, the wine and liquor, with melancholy, as they recalled the names and faces of comrades more than 3 decades earlier. The war that they all was poorly planned and badly managed. And we're still, and the communists, their own leaders, especially McNamara and, what was that guy, LBJ?
Yeah.
I wish I had the power to resurrect myself or resurrect him. Something about premature euthanasia. And the Congress had cut off funds to an ally and so forth. He says, we all thought that what we had gone for was for a noble cause, to assist an ally against the communists. As the night grew old and the waiters started to turn out the lights and clear the table, Dick Rutan wanted a final salute. So he says, gentlemen, they raised their glass, and those 6 warriors stood at the top of the Rex Hotel that day. And my toast was, when your flying days are over, and from this world we pass, may they bury us upside down so the whole world can kiss our ass. The next day, the Misties left Vietnam, and as they took off for home, they looked out the window at Saigon Airport and saw a 6-position anti-aircraft gun sight to protect the airport. And only this time, he was not pointed at them. It's for sale in the bookshop.
There you go.
Great book.
Thank you, Dick. All right, I'm going to steer the ship back to his seat for a minute, and he's going to come back because I got a couple stories I want you to hear, some really good ones. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk to Paul here for a minute and get him to come talk about his airplane. First of all, thank you so much for bringing it here. And yeah, you need to put. Well, there's a little. Did you see? There's a little oil down here.
Huh?
There is a little oil down
I'll forgive
there.
him.
Okay.
After you fly it, there's a lot more.
Yeah, I understand.
Cleaned off a little bit.
But thanks so much. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, this was a stalwart of the war. In particular, and Dick already talked about it, the Sandy missions. You know, these were the guys who were in there with the Jolly Greens, going to pick up our guys and doing the close air support to keep the bad guys down, so Jolly Greens could come pick up guys like Dick when he had to get picked up. We'll talk about that later. But always thought it was a cool airplane. They had a couple different models, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'll let you talk about it, Paul.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. First of all, it's an honor to be on stage with General Rutan here. That's a pretty amazing story and a great background, a great hero. We're going to go from super fast airplanes, the F-100, to super slow and low airplanes, the A1 Skyraider. So a little bit of history about the airplane. It was manufactured by the Douglas Aircraft Company. The first aircraft was delivered in 1947, so it was post-World War II, pre-Korea. And it was designed for the Navy to be a carrier-based ground attack airplane. They made about 3,200 of them over the course of its life. The last one was built in 1958, I believe. This airplane actually had more variants manufactured of it than just any other make model of a military aircraft. I think they had 27 different variants of this. So you'll see some airplanes that have the single canopy. You'll see some airplanes that are called a fat face with 84, 85 that has multiple places in it, and they used it for ground support, ground attack, search and rescue, electronic warfare, just all kinds of different applications. So it was originally used in the Navy, carrier base during Korea. When Vietnam came along, I think you probably know more about this than I do for sure, but everybody felt that our air assets were so far superior to the North Vietnamese that we wouldn't really have a big risk of a lot of shoot downs because they had a few MiG-15s, some MiG-17s, and maybe a couple MiG-21s. That was about it. And we had far superior air forces. But the thing that we didn't think about is that the Russians were supplying the North Vietnamese with surface-to-air missiles. And the missiles were what was really getting our pilots. And so we sort of underestimated our ability to do search and rescue operations. So the Air Force purchased 582 Skyraiders from the Navy and converted them to A1Hs and A1Js, I believe. And they divided them up into squadrons such as there's the Hobos, the Zorros, the Sandys. Was there another one? Or is that? I know those are at least three. But anyway, and so their job really was to escort the helicopters in, to once they found a downed pilot, Misty's found him, they'd mark him. The Skyraiders would come in and lay down ground fire around to protect the pilot as long as they could, and also to escort the helicopters in to allow them to come in and extract the downed airmen out of there. So these guys were slow. They were really, really rugged. The airplane has a Wright 3350 engine in it. It's got 18 cylinders, 2 rows of 9. 36 spark plugs, so our maintenance guys really love this airplane. They're changing all the spark plugs all the time. And it would fly maybe anywhere from 180 to 270 knot sort of range, so it's pretty slow, really rugged. And its empty weight was about 11,000 pounds, but its max takeoff weight was almost 22,000 pounds. So it could literally carry its own weight in fuel and ordnance. And it had lots of hard points, usually had a centerline fuel tank, and then it had, I think, 7 on each side, so it had 15 hard points, so you could put just a whole array of armaments of different types on there. And the guys who flew these things were incredibly brave, and we have this airplane at air shows, and Vietnam vets that were rescued or survived as a result of this Skyraider many, many times. I see them just come up and just touch the propeller, and you could just see the emotion coming out and the memories coming out of how this airplane literally saved their life, along with the other all the other was the helicopters and the fast FACs and the FACs and that sort of thing. So there's probably about maybe a dozen flying in the world. There's maybe 4 or 5 single seat, and then there's maybe another 5, 6, or 7 multi-seat aircraft. So that's just a quick overview of the airplanes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great airplane, and he'll remain a little bit afterwards. If y'all have got some questions, we can do it right after this, or you want to walk around the airplane, if you can, that'd be appreciated. But yeah, famous airplane, saved a lot of pilots, and Jolly Greens, and it carried a boatload of stuff, like you said, and a variety of ordnance, and yeah, and I'm sure that Dick was able to control a few of these. I was going to ask Dick about the accuracy of your rockets. You said you had 7 basically in pods on each wing. How accurate were you? I mean, I was an O2 guy, and I could sit there, and from low altitude, I could stick a rocket about anywhere I wanted to. But from high speed and high altitude, I would imagine that would be a little bit more difficult. Were your rockets very, very easy to aim, or was it just kind of, hey, get it in the ballpark and then talk them onto the target? Oh, he's laughing. Okay.
Well, Ed, see, the Misty pilots were about as good as they come.
Got it.
And we put that rocket any place.
I guess that's the answer.
If you're going after a real active, like 57, 37 millimeter, 6-position gun sight, what you want to do is put it just upwind, so as the smoke would blossom, it would hide them, and then that would help protect the first guy down the chute to kill him. We were that good.
You are good. I agree. And Did you ever carry anything other than Willie Pete's, other than white phosphorus rockets, or was
No,
that
those are the only thing that we carried. And
Okay.
we were forward air controllers, and that was our armament, and that's where dismarking. And they're not supposed to do anything else.
Yeah.
We'd violated that, and that's why I got shot down.
Yeah, and as long as you brought that up, let's go into that story.
Okay,
His last mission, as I remember.
Let me tell you a couple stories about
All right, you got it.
rescues and so forth. And first of all, I want to introduce another celebrity that we have in the audience, and it's Rob. Stand up, Rob. Robert, I went around the world horizontal in the Voyager. Here's the guy that decided to go around the world from pole to pole. Thank you, Rob. That's pretty neat.
Ooh.
It's got a great story. Okay. Okay, I want to. Everybody likes war stories, I get, and there was a couple of them. The only general officer to die in the whole Vietnam War, to die in combat, Air Force officer, the only one. His name was General Bob Worley.
Yep.
Yep. And he burned alive in the front cockpit of an RF-4 Phantom in the summer of 1968. The reason I know that I was sitting on his wing about 4 feet from him and watched him immolated in the cockpit. It shook me up pretty bad. Let me tell you about a typical Misty mission. The Misties, their day started about 2 or 3 hours before dawn. We go down and get an intelligence thing because we wanted to know where the flow of supplies were the interdiction points, how successful we were at different airstrikes to try to, and it was a big intelligence thing we went through. So if you were going up there the first one in the morning, then you had to be aware and get all briefed up on what's going on. So about an hour, 40 minutes before dawn, every morning at Phuket, there was a single F-100 that would light that afterburner and roar down that fog-shrouded runways, and Phuket climb up on top. And everybody knew that that was a Misty and where he was going. And he probably would not be back until noon because those missions were 5 and 6 hours long with multiple aerial refueling. It's really nice to have your own tanker. You don't have to share it. I says, he's mine. Don't mess with my tanker. So a lot of times we would come out sucking on fumes if we were involved in rush caps and stuff. And you sit behind this, off North Vietnam, you roll in behind this tanker and think, boy, if I mess this up, I'm going to get frowned at. Anyway, we have this intelligence briefing. The guy in the back seat, by the way, we swap back seat, front seat, every other mission, back and forth. And the guy in the front, he was the commander, and he was the one that flew the mission and decided what targets we were going to hit and so forth. And if you were in the back that day, you had a bunch of maps and grease pencils, and you're writing grease pencil information on the soft. You would check the fighters in, find out what their ordnance is, determine what the target was and the time over target, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you would see something, a transshipment point, a truck park, other things, and you didn't have any fighters to go after them, then you had to record all that and come back. So it's a big intelligence thing. So that little Misty every morning would take off and climb out and head for North Vietnam. We go up and refuel off the tanker. And when you're flying an airplane, you know you do what you got. You got checklists, refueling things, all those things that happen that you're doing. You're kind of busy. And then all of a sudden you back off of the tanker, and you descend, and you turn toward North Vietnam. And every morning we try to penetrate the airspace at different places so they didn't get used to where we were coming in. And all of a sudden there was really nothing to do. You arm the rockets, you arm the gun sight, arm the 20 millimeter cannons, you tighten the chin strap, put the visor down, make sure the damn seat pins were out of the thing. Everything was all tight. You turned all your emitters off and make darn sure you weren't broadcasting with lights or transponders or something like that. And then there was a handful of minutes as you descended from 24,000 feet and you wanted to hit the coast of North Vietnam at a random place. And you wanted to go really fast. And usually in the morning, the coastal plain, it's all farmland, rice paddies and so forth, and the visibility is kind of low, not really very good. But I tell you what, it's the most peaceful, smooth air you've ever flown in. Beautiful. And you look up there, and what comes into view as North Vietnam comes up, it's the most peaceful, solemn place you'd ever think. Nothing happening. And then when the first gunners shoot you sight you. What they did every morning is they'd fill the whole sky full of tracers. And in the low, dim light of the early morning, you could see every one of those things, from 50 cal to the larger 57, 37 millimeter, and a lot of ZPUs that you can't even see. You'd fill the sky. Now, you're a little ominous feeling going in there, but when the first time that thing shoots and they're shooting at you, it all changes. Aha! And I say there's a little combat gland. It's right here, I think. You can feel it there, and you know where it is. And it only gets active when you get shot at. But what the endorphin that little combat gland pumps into your body is incredible. It's euphoric. But the bad thing is it is extremely addictive. And if you go up there and nobody's shooting at you, you go and mess with them to get you to shoot at it. And when you get shot at, the gland comes and you get this big hit. And then our mission from then on was just to play a lot of high G, a lot of random. And your jinking was always random because all the roads were crooked. They kind of did it for themselves. And so then was fights on. And our job was to find truck marks, is to try to find strikes that happened during the night, and all the things you do to stop the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And then before you know it, it's noon. And you may have done a rest cap, and you may put on a bunch of fighters. There must have been intense enemy ground fire. One thing that I like to do was, and they didn't like this of me, but if somebody shoots at you, the ability to go back and kill them is very important. And I couldn't understand a lot of people that have to fly straight and level with people shooting at you, and you can't do a damn thing about it. But if you're a Misty FAC, you can go back and kill them. Now, our policy up there was that there's some gun sites that were really good, and some of them were really bad. And every morning we go and meet the kid on the cars, and he was just over the border into Laos, and he set up on the top of this cars, and he had a 50 caliber gun, machine gun. And I don't know how he got the gun up there or how he got the ammo up there, but every single morning he would greet us. Now he's going around the circle, and without exception, if we were over here, he would always shoot over there. So we'd always take a new guy up there and introduce him to the kid on the cars, and he was so bad. There was never any danger to anybody, but it was a learning, it was a training aid. It was really good. And so all of us Misties knew if that guy, nobody would touch him because he was very bad. We delivered his mail for him. We put his lunch in the speed brake well and flew over and dropped him because we wanted to take care of him. So you perpetuate incompetency, but every once in a while there'll be a gun site. There'll be a gun site that's really camouflaged. And for some reason you missed it. And you turn and you have your belly up. If you have your belly up to the gun site, then they will shoot. But they better kill us because if they don't, they know what's going to happen. And sometimes you can feel those rounds coming by like a baseball bat pounding on the edge of the bottom of the airplane with the shock waves. And I swear to God, sometimes I was sitting there in the refueling pool. Sometimes the tracers would come right between it. Well, maybe not, but it felt close like that. So when they would shoot, I'd roll back and look at them, and then they had a black ring. You guys that flew up there, they have a black ring around the gun site that would be drifting away. He says, "You were really good. You were really clever. You got to die." And so then we just orbited right over them, the top of them. Sometimes we could have ordnance that was readily available, or we could divert a couple of flights off the Alpha Strike Force going downtown Hanoi. But we'd just be out of their range and orbit them. And I like to mess with them because they knew what the drill was going to be. Pretty soon I'd be joined with a couple of Flight of 4 F5s, F-105s, or F-4s. It's a lot of gun-killing ordnance. And I often wonder what those little guys were thinking about on the ground as we orbited over them. They knew one thing, that if the Misty marked them, they were done. You ever the feeling when you're a kid and you go to the swimming pool and you make this big mistake, you climb up on the high dive? Remember that feeling? And you walk out on the edge of the high dive and you think, God, I don't want to be here. It looked like a mile high. And you just, for all the world, you want to turn around and go down the ladder, but then your friends are down there and there's no way, and you're forced to jump. That feeling you have? But it's weight orbit. We'd brief them with the bailout areas, where the winds were, what the altimeter setting was, what the gun sights were. And then when all the briefing was done, then somebody had to mark them. And I take a deep breath and say, wow, because I know what's going to happen in the next handful of minutes. In the orbit, they knew all about us because we were up there all the daylight hours. There was a Misty up there someplace. And so the Misty would roll, wings verted, and you pull your nose down. Now, as soon as you rolled inverted and pulled your nose down, all those gun sights opened up. And you were the only target. Now, normally, if you're flying by real fast, they have to lead you, and there's a solution. But there's a time when there's no solution required if you're a gunner. And that means when the airplane is coming directly at you, you don't have to lead anybody or anything. You just shoot at him because he's coming directly at you. So you want to minimize that time. So you roll it over, and all the tracers are coming up all around you, and you pull the nose down, and you roll out. And it took all the willpower you could ever muster to take that second and a half of tracking to make sure the solution was just right, and then pickle off that one Willie Pete. Now, normally you'd pull off straight ahead, but you never pull off straight ahead. When I'd fire, I roll inverted like that and pull down towards the ground and then back around up like that. And then I'd look at the accuracy of my mark. And if it was good, you could just say, hit my smoke. But almost invariably, if we were going after gun sites, the whole world with a square mile knew where the gun sight was. Because if you've ever seen a 6-position 57 millimeter gun sight, and the muzzle flashes were huge, and those tracers, they were big as your fist coming up. You roll out, you mark the target, pull off, and then lead rolled in. He'd rolled in and try to hit him. And the flight of 3, he was down to shoot first. I'd come out the other side, and I'd come back around and head on to number 2 coming in to try to draw some fire from number 2, and we'd cross. And then number 4 would come in, and hopefully in that iteration, we'd turn that gun sight into a sand hill. Mess with a Misty, you guy. We'll come back and fix you. So anyway, with those types of things, we had kind of a relationship with a lot of the gunners. Now, the smaller caliber ones, they'd all shoot at you. All the villages, they're all AK-47s, and it was not unusual to come back with an AK round in your airplane. That was really common. Now, another story about the frustration of the warrior in Vietnam. It seems like sometimes that our government or our leaders did not want to win the damn war. Case in point. And it's a rescue of Scotch 03. Scotch 03 was an F-105 pilot. Number 3, he was a lieutenant colonel. Lieutenant Colonel, I always wanted to forget his name on purpose for what happened. But anyway, they called, and I could hear the 105 flying and say, hey, has anybody seen number 3? I don't know what happened. Where is he? And so we went over there real quick, and I could see the classic crash site with the fire burning coming out through the jungle. But I'd look around, and just by the fluke of a chance, I saw his red and white parachute in the top of the jungle. As I came around and I looked at that, and I says, wow. And it was only visible for about 3 seconds, and then it was gone. Fortunately, I memorized that point before I took my eyes off. And then we come up and started circling him. So we tried to call him, and no answer. Call him, no answer. And then so I thought, well, about the radio. So I pulled up, and I ran a simulated dive bomb pass at that place. And that's the only time that I could talk to him, ask a question, and he could respond, and we'd pull off. So that was our communications with Scotch 03 that morning, or it was evening, it was about dark. And he says, I'm down, I have a broken back, and I can't move, and I really like to get out of here. So it wasn't enough chance to get the A4s or the Jollies up there at that time. So the last thing I said to him as the sun was going down, he says, you hide out, get a good night's sleep, ha, 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 and we'll be back to get you in the morning. So I had flown the afternoon Misty mission, which 6 hours. So I'd flown 7.5 hours that day before we put him to bed, went back and landed in Da Nang, and tried to organize the rescue, which turned out to be pretty sad. Anyway, I was up 3 hours of sleep back in my F-100, and it just at dawn, I came across that spot in an afterburner to wake him up. Now, I couldn't imagine he would be asleep. I said, you still there? Yep, my back hurts really bad. Come and get me. I said, okay, we're on our way. So the next morning, the disjointed, uncoordinated rescue attempt was a thing of beauty. I mean, horribly frustrated. Like we were trying to save one of a fellow fighter pilots. So they call off the whole rescue because a B-52 from 40,000 feet was going to drop bombs in the DMZ area. So we have to wait till that gets over. You know, no priority, I guess. And that whole morning, there were 2 helicopters that came in. What they had done at night, they searched around on the ground, the bad guys, and they found it. And they set up a flak trap all around it. So the helicopter would come, as soon as it would come into a hover, they shot them. Heavy ground fire, they shot the heck out of both Jolly Green Giants twice. There was an A1 Skyraider, and he was a H model. And I don't know why he didn't use the Yankee system, but he was all shot up, and he decided that he would not. The Yankee system was a rocket that would pull you out of the seat in a parachute. For some reason, he didn't want to use that, and he tried to dead stick into the Benhai River. And it was unsuccessful, and he was killed. So there's 2 helicopters that were shot to pieces. And they were orbiting, trying to organize assets coming in, and it was just incredibly frustrating. So I'd been at this thing for 7 hours and all morning, another 6 hours that morning. And I was tired. And so anyway, I was going to be relieved by the afternoon Misty, a guy named Wells Jackson. Really a great guy. So Wells Jackson come up, and I briefed him on the situation. And just about the time I was leaving, all of a sudden there's word come from Crown Headquarters, or Search and Rescue Headquarters, and it says, okay, pull out the forces. Now, we had a couple of flights of F-4s and F-105s all in orbit over there, and we're all ready to go and get this guy, a fellow fighter pilot. And they call up and they says, hey, cancel it. Pull out the forces. We're going to quit. Now, I'll tell you, the only reason that's Misty's or reason that any of you guys went up there is that we had an agreement with our government that if we were not captured and we had that little radio that we could talk, you would never abandon us. You would always come up and get us. I mean, you would dig a trench and sail the Queen Mary up there to come and rescue us. That's our agreement that we had with our government. And you can imagine the feeling that you've been rejected by your government, and they violated a prime directive that we had that we flew up there. They were going to pull out and leave somebody with a broken back that was still talking to us. Now, the feeling that this young captain had, the audacity of this young captain. He keyed the mic button, he says, who made that decision? And they says, well, sir, it's down in Saigon, Crown Headquarters made the decision to pull out. I says, no. I want to know the guy's name that made that decision. He said, well, it's a general officer. I said, okay. I says, okay. And I realized something. There was only one guy that was going to talk to him. And if they're going to pull those forces out and let him die, guess who was going to have to deliver the message to go get him? And I thought, you son of a gun. If you decided to cancel this rescue forces and leave one of our fellow warriors to die needlessly in the jungle, then you could come up with the exact words you want to tell me. So I asked him, I want to know the exact words that I'm supposed to tell him that you're going to leave him to die. Ooh. Then there was a lot of silence about that. So anyway, I was briefing Wells Jackson, and with a heavy heart that morning, I pulled up, departed Vietnamese airspace, and flew back to Phuket and landed. And I was sitting at the bar with a few bottles of libation around me. And I was contemplating whether I even ought to go up there anymore. If my government didn't think enough to violate their prime directive, that maybe I shouldn't do this for them. And I'm really feeling bad. About the time the sun was going down, Wells Jackson, he walked in the door and he had a big smile on his face. And he walked up, he saw me, and I says, Wells, what the hell are you smiling about after what happened today? And he says, Dick, we got Scotch out. I says, you got him out? Really? What the hell happened? He says, well, the general couldn't come up with the exact words. So we went back and got him. Now, that rescue was a Medal of Honor Award rescue. Now, the flak track governors, you know, when they come into a hover, they shot, and the guy gets away. So they're really smart now. So they wait until the helicopter comes into a hover, puts the cord down, you know, the penetrator, the cable that they're going to pull him up. And then they know they're trapped. He can't get away. And then they start shooting. So we still had Wells had the fighters circling. We're all ready to go. The A1s are circling, and the Jolly Green comes in there. Now, this Jolly Green is an HH-3 helicopter, and he is flown by a Coastie, an exchange officer. He was a captain. His name is Don Engen. And he was the cop. And the PJ that was going to go down the ground had been in country right out of school 4 days. 4 days. He was a one-striper or two-striper right out of PJ school. And he was going to go down and get him because he had a broken back. And so what happened, the helicopter came in, hovered. They put him on the cable. They set Sergeant Tanner, Airman Tanny at that time, put him on the ground and pulled the cable back up and went away. And Sergeant Tanny, or Airman Tanny, went around and found Scott 03. They found him. Okay, now once they found him, then he calls the helicopter on his little radio, and he vectors him over the top. And he's hovering, nice hover, and then the cable goes down. And the cable is really slow. You put your finger on the button, and it just unwinds. If you're getting shot at, it's really slow. But nothing's happening. Everything is calm, see? The cable's going down, cable's going down. It went down, and Tanny got a hold of the guy, and maybe he was a little rough on him, he thought. In fact, he wrote him up for rough handling. Son of a bitch. I should have left him. Put him down. They put him on this penetrator. It's got two little seats on it. Put the strap on. Hold on to it. And then in his radio, and the recording is something else. I mean, this is unbelievable, the recording. And he calls on, everything's quiet now. He calls on the radio and he says, okay, I got him. Pull me up. And so he starts up off the jungle floor. He's got to go through maybe a couple 100 feet of jungle foliage. He's coming up really slow. And once he gets about 30, 40 feet off the ground, they open up. The whole world opens up. And Tanny grabs the radio and he's screaming. He says, ground fire, take it out, ground fire, cut me loose, take it out. And I talked to him later. I says, how in the world could you ask that helicopter that's saving your life to cut you loose? I mean, how brave is that be? It's incredible. And he looked at me years later and he says, oh, no, sir. No, sir. He says, I didn't want the damn thing falling on me. Because what he saw up there, that helicopter was being shot to pieces. There was plexiglass coming out. There was holes in it. One of the landing gear had fallen out of the airplane. It's punctured a whole bunch of fuel lines. Crap was falling out. And it was just hovering there. And I asked Don Hagen later, I says, wow, that was really something. And you know what his comment was? He said, sir, there was no fine way that I was going to ever abandon my PJ on the ground. And right now we're working on trying to upgrade his Air Force Cross when I found out that the Coast Guard had not had a Medal of Honor during the war. And I thought if anybody deserved that, especially the Coast Guard for all the work that they did, that this is an opportunity to upgrade that thing to a Medal of Honor. And they pulled him up, they got him in the helicopter, they dragged him across the DMZ to the head of medevac station at the rock pile, and they got him out. He couldn't say the magic word. Wow. How do you get people like that? Another time was the F4 where the general died. We're on our mission up in North Vietnam, flying around. We heard a Mayday, Mayday. He's an F4, an RF-4C Phantom. He's calling Mayday. He's been hit just above the DMZ. And so now we're out. We're going to join up with him to fly his wingman to try to escort him back to Da Nang or something. Now, those rescue missions, those missions, the reconnaissance missions that those guys flew. Now, when we're in North Vietnam, we're going like stink, and we're janking all the time. Random janking. So they can never do it. But those guys, at 500 feet and 500 knots, straight and level. And I used to help them get their start point and then orbit over them as they were going. But here's an airplane that's going straight and level for I don't know how many minutes to do their click, 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 click pattern. I thought, boy, to fly around up here straight and level, that takes cojones, Mike. And I knew one thing, that there was only company grade officers that flew those airplanes. Captains, second lieutenants. It was very rare that you had a major or a lieutenant colonel. I had absolutely no idea that the front seat was a general officer. It was a general officer on his last mission. It was his going home mission. It was his sandplane flight, and his mission was over, and he was going home. General Bob Worley, and he was the only fighter pilot in headquarters Saigon that was a fighter pilot. The rest of them were any bomber pilots here? Okay, any bomber pilot.
You're safe.
Okay,
You're
well,
safe.
everybody, all the generals up there were all bomber pilots. And there was a big controversy about, couldn't understand. Why do you dive at the target? To take a target out. Why are you diving? He says, well, why don't you just fly level and drop the bombs? So anyway, that's the kind of leadership that we had sometimes. But Bob Worley, he was a treasure. I did not know that there was a general officer in front. When I joined up on his wing, I was looking at a white helmet, and I thought I was talking to a lieutenant or a lowly captain like me. And there would be a navigator in the back seat, something, right? That's my perception of this whole thing. And we had a conversation back and forth. But I was not talking to the general. I was talking to a CNI major. You know what a CNI major is?
Yeah, I've followed them.
It's probably the toughest job in the Air Force, to fly along and take care of a general officer. So when we pulled in on them and found out they had a fire up in the front of the cockpit or in front of the fuselage, up in the camera bay, you could see it burning and stuff. So he pulled out and says, okay, you got a fire in the nose, and now we're over the Gulf of Tonkin. We're 10,000 feet, the right airspeed, perfect conditions for an ejection. Ideal. And so I thought, hey, this is cool. So I pulled out the route formation, and I wanted to be that close and see the Martin Baker ejection system work, the canopy, the rocket motor, the parachute deployment, to be that close. I said, this is really cool. Here again, thinking that there was a captain up front or a lieutenant, and who was in the back. And it was just neat as hell. The back canopy come off in slow motion, and I made special note about how much it cleared the tail. That's really important. Okay, and right after that, the seat starts up, the rails, and then the rocket motor ignites. And the thing is, the rocket motor comes up and the seat as stable as it can be. It comes up. As soon as the rocket motor turned off, a little drogue chute comes off, pitches the guy back, and the drogue chute pulls the main parachute out, and the parachute inflates. Of course, all this is happening, and I'm watching it behind me like that. It comes out, and I says, wow, that is really cool to be able to see something like that. So I turned around and looked at what I saw in the front cockpit. I'll never forget. The front cockpit was full of fire. Because whatever happened, the pressure of the back canopy leaving and the fire up in the nose had burned through the cockpit area, pressurization area, and it destroyed it. And all that fire right now was being sucked through the front cockpit and out the canopy in the back that was gone. And the fire was so intense that the fire was all the way over the top of the airplane, and it started burning the tail of the airplane. And I'll never forget, the cockpit full of fire and that white helmet sitting there. And he didn't eject. I thought, yeah, why doesn't he eject? Doesn't he know he's on fire? Okay, now, you got to understand the psychology of this. And so I thought, well, I better tell him that you're on fire and maybe you ought to eject. So in my screaming tone, I was saying, strobe on one, bail out, strobe on one, bail out, just screaming at him to get out. And he still sat there right in the middle of this huge fire. And I thought, aha, I know why he can't hear me. I'm too far away. So from route formation, which is 2 to 4 wingspans, I drove that F-100 in as close as I could, thinking that if I get close to him, now he can hear me and he will eject. Is that absurd? I mean, what are you going to do? I'm looking at this horrible thing that was just a big shock. And so I drove that old F-100 in as close as I could get, and I hit him. Still screaming at him. I hit him. Well, air pressure. And that old Phantom, I rolled him up like that, and I said, oh, damn. And I pulled back, and it turned exactly 90 degrees and was heading right for the beach. It was the most beautiful, well, I mean, a perfectly smooth glide, descent right to the beach. So I went back and rejoined with him again, still screaming the same thing. And in horror, watching that white canopy, that white helmet, as it disappeared in black, and the front part of the Phantom was the paint was being blistered, and now the fire was gone. But there's this acrid smoke that went all the way over, and I couldn't even see the top of the tail. You just didn't want to leave him. It's a fellow captain, fellow lieutenant, and I stayed right on his tail. And there's one guy that was with me. His name is Don Harlan, and he's not here today. But he has a secret that only him and I know. I'm right beside him, and I don't want to leave him. And I darn near, if it hadn't been for Don saying, "Dick, pull up," and I looked up, and we damn near crashed right beside him. It screwed me up so much. And I pulled up, and there was a big, huge fireball right beside us, and pulled up. And they come back, and it says, "Is there any survival? Any survival?" As we pulled up to go out to see the backseater, he says, "Negative survival, negative survival." And that was it, final. Now, we'd seen a lot of crashed airplanes, a whole bunch of shoot downs and stuff in the 8 months that I was up there. And normally they just write it off. Okay, airplane crashed, no survivors, get on with the war. But for some reason, they were flying a whole bunch of security in there, and they're going to surround the area with security. And they were going to have a lot of medevacs, a whole bunch of attention to this crash site. And it never dawned on me what the hell it was all about. So I pulled up, there the parachute was hanging. And as he was coming down, I noticed that there was some motorized junks coming off the shore out to get him. Well, you don't mess with a pilot. And we got some really good rescue things. The Jolly Grains will come up and pick them up, and that'll be cool. But we don't want any motorized South Vietnamese or North Vietnamese junks motorized coming out to get our pilot. And so he says, "Okay, we're going to doze them right across their bow." That didn't work. So I pulled up around, and Harlan was in the front seat that day. I was their instructor pilot. And I said, "Okay, go ahead and kill him." And so at the last minute, I thought, why don't you just put some strafe across their nose? You know, we don't know who they are. Maybe they're here to help. Maybe they're not. Can't take a chance. So he goes right in front of their nose. And it's kind of rough that day, and he was going along like that. And all of a sudden, and he goes, whoop, doom, 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 doom. And he beat feet back, and the Jollies picked him up. And I got to hear their story from their point of view. But there was a lot of frustration like that sometimes.
Dick, I got to say thank you. It's a sad story to end on, but that's war. That's what you guys did, and a lot of frustration, as you say, but a lot of heroism out there too. A lot of dedicated warriors who did the job, regardless of what the politicians had to say. And I'm here to say thank you for what you did.
Well, it was really frustration. And if you got a minute, I'll tell you about my last mission.
We got a minute. We still got a minute. The last mission, yeah, it's a good story. So yeah, just
okay. I'll tell it real quick.
Okay.
Anyway, this was my second Misty tour. Most of the Misties were up there for 120 days because of the 28% high loss rates. But I finished my tour, and I could have gone back, but I said, darn it, I can't go back to busting trees and making monkeys deaf. I want to know where the action is up north. And so I begged and borrowed, and they let me do another Misty tour. And I was just finishing up that tour, and I was in one of my buddies that was flying his last mission. It was his champagne flight for his first tour. I was on my last tour. And so I said, hey, Chuck, why don't I go with you? You know, we're hometown guys, and I'll fly your last mission, and it'll be a nice article in the Orange Cove Times or something. 2 local heroes fly last mission. So anyway, we took off, and our deal that was to go and try to improve it. We have in-country our fighters that are they're all trained to work troops in contact, really close proximity, and they have to be really accurate. And so if we could get those guys up into North Vietnam, we can improve our bombing accuracy, right? So that was the big test. So we went up that morning, we found an old truck sitting by itself, and says, okay, there's our target. These guys will come up. They're weapons school graduates, the cream to the cream of fighter pilots, and they will just blow away this truck. And all 3 of them went down the chute, and they missed as bad as the F-4 Phantoms did most of the time. So right then, actually, our test was over. I mean, the test had failed, and we should have stopped everything. But I looked down there at that damn truck laughing at us. So they tried some high angle strafe, and that never works. And so the truck was laughing, and we thought, well, we'll fix you. And so I was in the back seat, and Chuck came around like that, and he did a low angle strafe pass. That means that you're going to open fire at about 50 foot above the ground with about a 1.5 degree glide slope for strafe. And I was looking over his shoulder, and he was right beside this car, so I could see monkeys up there. See what color their eyes were. That close. So anyway, the pipper came up real slow, and just when it got there, you bunt it just a little bit, and then you fire. And Chuck just blew the hell out of that truck, pieces and stuff, and we pulled up. Bam! And I looked in the mirror, and it was full of fire. We were burning like mad, so we pulled up a little bit and pulled it out of afterburner, and the fire turned into white. But the basic was that we got hit in the forward fuselage tank, and it was gushing fuel out. As it went back afterburner, then it was a big long flame. So now we had to make the decision really quick. We're going to stay here and bail out of the jungle for a better chance of rescue, or take a huge chance and go over that coastal plain with all the farmers and stuff. There's no chance of rescue if you bail out to get to the water. So we decided we're going to go to the water. Easy decision, right? We go for it. So we're climbing out, blew all the tanks and everything, cleaned the wing, and we're climbing out like that. Now, pilots make judgments, and you see the coast up there, right, and it's coming, and you see the fuel gauge unwinding, you see the coast coming, and you see the thing unwinding, and you realize NFW. There's no fine way we're going to make it. So the only thing left to do is maybe we can take some of that fuel and put it in our afterburner, and before it dumps overboard, and then we can accelerate and get to the coast. However, the conversation with all the other planes around, he says, what if all that fuel is inside the engine compartment? If it's there and you light the afterburner, the whole damn tail of the airplane is going to blow off. But then I looked down at the coastal plains, and remember I saw an F-105 pilot down there, and when the civilians got a hold of him, I came by as they were macheting and decapitating him. So I knew what our welcome was down there. And so he says, okay. So we gritted our teeth, and he says, okay, Chuck, light the burner. So I lit the burner, didn't blow up. How it ignited that big, long stream of fire. So there's 3 people coming out, and one of them was just burning like 700 feet of flame behind him. But then we realized that, hey, we're going to make it now. We're going really fast. We were going supersonic when the thing finally flamed out. Another thing that happened on the way out, we have a raw gear up there, and it tells you about AAA gun sight, radar control gun sights, SAM launches and stuff right up there. And it goes from warning with the rattlesnake sound of the fan song radar. And I remembered later that thing was screaming like mad, like a SAM launch. But you prioritize things. Normally, if that thing lights up, you split for the deck and get out of there. But if you're on fire heading for the ghost, that's a minor thing. And I asked the other guys in the flight about it. I said, do you remember that thing? The radar went up, remember that? The guy says, yeah, I do remember that. He says, what'd you do? I turned it off. Anyway, for the first time, I finally realized that I was going to get out of this thing alive. I was going to get to go home and see my family and my young daughter. If you're a true warrior, if you want to do your job, you have to accept the fact that you're not going to make it out of this alive. And if you continually think that you're going to get out of this alive and try to preserve your own life when you're in combat, you're an ineffective warrior and you shouldn't be up there. So for all those 8 months, I figured that I was going to be a prisoner of war at the best, and I'd already accepted that. And all of a sudden that moment thought, hey, look at the coast, and look how fast we're going. We're going to make it. And all of a sudden, the whole feeling changed inside. All I got to do is eject, get rescued, and I can go home to see my new baby.
Cool.
And that's what happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. I'm going to wrap it up and just say, do we still, to my producers, have time for a few questions? No, we really don't. All right. We do. I get a thumbs up over here. All right, let's have just a couple quick questions today. Couple quick questions from the audience? Yes? No? All right, there's one right there, that young man.
Do you know why the general didn't eject? Was he killed, or was there a problem with the ejection seat?
Okay, yeah, real quick, and that's an excellent question. Unfortunately, another thing that I never liked about the Phantom was its ejection system. The front canopy is bent down like that, and if you unlock it, it's trapped. You have to have two pneumatic plunger to put the leading edge up so you can get rid of it. You can unlock it, but the canopy's trapped. And in the F4 Phantom ejection system, there's a cable that goes to the canopy called a wishbone in the back here on the Martin Baker. And if that thing is not pulled, then the seat won't fire. And so what we surmise happened was that ground fire had destroyed that pneumatic system. And he probably was trying to eject, but he didn't know it, that when he was hit over North Vietnam, he either had to land the airplane or he was going to die. And that's how we surmise happened, that it destroyed the part of that complicated ejection system. By the way, about ejecting, if you know where that's going to happen to that jet in a handful of time, you don't want to be anywhere near it. And when you sit up straight and squeeze those ejection handles, I got to do it twice, squeeze those ejection handles, and that rocket fires and you're going out of that airplane. That is the smoothest, most wonderful ride you'll ever take in your life.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Dick, thank you for your... It's been an honor.
Oh, yeah. Hey, we're going to be in the gift shop right behind us. And if you'd like to get one of the books or autograph them, and I'll say as long as you want, answer any of your questions. Because after all, Dick Rutan was only put on the surface of this planet for one reason. That was to serve his fellow men.
There we go.
Thank you, Dick.